Hey all. Hey, I had to pop cough drop in my mouth. My throat is really dry, so excuse me. Um, so today I'm just sort of winging it. I'm going to riff a little bit. Mm, Excuse me. So I was just thinking about what's missing for most of us most of the time. What's missing? Course of Miracles talks about, I've mentioned this many times here, but it's talks about how all problems on the planet boil down to one real problem. And so the many millions of problems we think we have can all boil down to separation or the belief in separation. And so the only real solution, or the real solutions to our problems, are all some form of communion or union, connection, uniting. And if you look around the world today, you're going to see that this is 100% true. And so that's one thing that's missing. That's the big problem solver, is some form of unity coming together, connecting in your individual problems, in your world, whatever's happening, and in the grand scheme of things as well. Um, but I also want to look at a couple of other things that might be missing on the planet, and they're all like forms of unity or union. So, or I should say, these things spring out of um, the lack of connection. And so, if you had to say, you can drop a message in the chat here, and answer this for me. But if you had to say, if you look at the masculine and feminine principles, or masculine and feminine forces, or masculine and feminine energies, and you had to guess which one is lacking on the planet, which one is there not enough of, what would you say? And just feel into it. What would you say? All right. I would say that what's missing on the planet is the feminine. And not that I want to get into any trouble here with anybody out there, um, but what's missing really is the feminine. And so we've gone through a lot of changes over the past 5 decades, 6 decades or so, around how our society works, especially here in the United States. We have feminism, we have the feminist movement, which needed to happen. I'm not saying that didn't need to happen, that needed to happen, but I think most movements um, get sort of co-opted by the powers that be. I won't get into all of who that is or what that is. And then they get sort of twisted or turned into something they weren't originally meant to be. And so each movement that comes along is happening because a shift needs to occur. And so I want to say this: men and women are equally deserving of respect and honor and love, but we are not equal. We're not the same. And you know that if you really think about it, we're very different. Um, and but both equally deserving of respect and honor. But we have to recognize the differences and understand them. And so in order to do that, I would like to take it into the realm of just masculine and feminine energy, or masculine and feminine forces. So the masculine force is the productive force, right? Um, and the feminine force is the receptive force, you could say, or receptive energy. If you had to guess again at which one of those energies is better at listening or better at receiving information, which one would it be? I mean, if the feminine energy is the receptive force, in order for us to receive anything, to listen, to take in, to understand, to know, we have to be able to receive. So we have to step into that aspect of ourselves. Now, we're all both, right? We're all masculine, we're all feminine, we have both in all of us. As men, we tend to, men, humans, the hue of God, the light of God, the hume, the voice, the sound, the word of God manifests into a physical container, a physical body. That's a human. As humans, we're all both, but we tend to, depending on whether we manifest in a male body or a female body, we major in one or the other of those two forces and then minor in the opposing force. So you could say most men, let's say 80% of men, and this has nothing to do with sexual preference. So let's just take it out of there. So there's no fear here. There's no judgment. This isn't about any of that. Just most men, straight or gay, most men, 80% roughly, there's the 80-20 rule, come into the world or into the physical being majoring to some degree in the masculine and then minoring in the feminine, you could say. So the oversoul or the overlord is a masculine force, and that's good. No accidents. Like, we need to balance masculine, feminine. Men, the male container comes bringing the masculine for the most part, and the female container, 80% major in the feminine, minor in the masculine. So you could say the feminine is the oversoul or the overlord, right? This could be a huge conversation. I'm not going to get into all of it. If you have any questions, just drop them in the chat. And I'll talk more about this over time. But so if that's is sort of how it goes, then you have to understand how the masculine and feminine work together, right? And then how men and women work together in general. Okay, I wanted to say, in general, most of the time, there are exceptions to every rule, exceptions to every structure or situation. We're not talking about the exceptions. I just want to talk about the general dynamic, the rule and the dynamic between masculine and feminine, men and women. So if the feminine is the receptive force, you could say that the feminine is the part of us that is closest to God or closest to the universe or closest to knowledge or all truth, really all the same thing, right? It's the feminine in us that receives. And so we can see how that works in us as individuals. In order to receive guidance or knowledge, you sit down, you close your eyes, you take a breath, you get quiet, you step into your receptive mode, and you listen. That's what meditating really is. It's the willingness to see, to hear, to listen, to be filled. Think about it, right? That's the feminine mode. The willingness to take in, to be filled. And that's for all of us. But the way it works for us as a dynamic between men and women, and then in the world as a community, is in order for the feminine to show up in the world, there has to be a strong masculine, strong, healthy, clear, powerful masculine to create safety or safe space for the feminine to show up. And so if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for the feminine to come into being in general. And it works that way in your individual life too. If a woman doesn't feel safe, it's going to be very hard for her to relax back into her feminine, right? And so I always say to the men around me and to myself that the number one thing women need from us as men is safety. So the number one thing you have to provide for all of the women around you, men, whether you know them, they're close to you, not close to you, could be the woman you walk past on the street, is you want to send a message to that woman that she is safe by you being a safe person for them to be around. As we send more and more of that message and we become, strong in our masculine, um, the women around us will relax more and more feminine will come into the planet through women. Now, feminine comes in through men too, right? But the way I'm talking about in dynamics and the way we work together, what's happened over time, and again, I think everything that happened in the 60s needed to happen, and you know, but we tend to do these pendulum swings, right? So because there were roles before the 60s, like in the 50s and earlier, there were roles, men and women each had their roles, and it's a good thing to have roles if you fit into the role and you like that role. Most people did, um, because we know how to interact, we know how to relate to each other. And so the problem was we didn't give enough value to one side of the equation, right? Because the masculine, and therefore men, tend to be the ones out in front, leading, you know, overtly leading and out in front and being out in the world, doing, creating, producing. That's masculine, right? So, because most men were doing that, um, it was valued more in the world. The What was not valued enough, of course, was the female contribution or the feminine contribution, the contribution of women. And so something had to shift. And eventually, over time, we had this breakthrough and things started to shift. But I think where we made the mistake was we flipped and we did a pendulum swing. And now we're being asked to sort of swing back closer to the center. And so I'm just going to do a short version of this. I know it'll probably get me in a little bit of difficulty with some people, but in a lot of ways, men have been feminized. I don't think there was an evil intention behind that. It's just sort of what happened in this process where we did a major pendulum swing. And the women have become much, much more masculine. Like, of course, many more women are out in the workforce, and to be out in the workforce, especially a lot of leadership type of jobs, that's going to be more masculine oriented. There's nothing wrong with that if women are in those jobs and doing that. But when it comes to how we interact together, it works better if you are indeed a woman who majors in the feminine, when you're relating to your masculine man, to relate to that man from your feminine place. And so it allows the man to show up more in his masculine. Here's the thing about women, because most women major in the feminine. The feminine's like 100 times more powerful than the masculine on an energetic level, right? And so what it adopts, what it takes on to do, it's going to do really well. It's very easily, I should say it this way, it's very women, easy for women to emasculate the men around them when they're being in their masculine. And so the problem with that is we have all this masculine energy coming forward. The masculine energy coming through in the men is on a lot of levels weak. It's like I say, it's been softened and weakened in a way that is not good. There are ways that it is good, but in certain ways it's not. So a lot of men have lost their drive or their leadership. And then a lot of women are really heavy into their masculine. I mean, the masculine feels very powerful, and there's a lot of acknowledgement for it in the world. But the truth is, to be a really powerful woman, you want to learn how to master the feminine. Again, if indeed you are a woman in the 80% who came on the planet to major in the feminine. And so we need to allow more feminine to the world. And the way that works with men and women is men provide the safety energetically for the women to channel the feminine. We all have both. We all get to experience both. But in the dynamic, in the dance, that's how it works. And the world is really in need of feminine energy right now. Remember, the feminine energy is the receptive, the nurturing energy, right? Um, it's that part of us that's able to see in and soften, right, and allow. And so we need that right now. And so women can support men in being more masculine by allowing that. And men can allow women to channel the feminine by showing up strong in their masculine. Again, not in a negative way. I've said this many times, but there is really, the masculine is not toxic. Can a man be toxic? Sure, but so can a woman. Can the masculine force show up in a damaging, destructive, toxic way? Yep. Right. But it itself, the masculine force is not toxic, nor is the feminine. They're not toxic. It becomes toxic when we are not managing those energies appropriately or properly. And so we want to just get rid of that messaging altogether. Right. Um, and so the feminine's missing on the planet. Our ability to connect or build union, true union, community is missing on the planet, and purpose is missing on the planet. And so it's not like we aren't purposeful about things, but purpose that I speak into is purpose with a capital P, right? Which I talked about last week. Um, it's your passion, your purpose, the thing you actually came to the planet to give. Most people are so far away from their passion and purpose because we're very caught up in getting. We feel vulnerable. We feel like we're lacking. We're not aware of the truth of who we are. We're not aware of our true essence. And so we're out in the world trying to get, and that's what we're being purposeful about. But that is not our purpose. We didn't come here to get anything. Doesn't really make sense if you think about it. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do this week is to check in on those three things. If you're a man, now here's another thing, just to sort of give you some insight. We tend to create these uh what they call in landmark form. Anybody knows what they call them winning formulas. But we tend to create these ways of winning. By the time you're 6 or 7, you sort of invent your personality and you have all these ways to keep yourself safe and sort of win in the world, right? The problem with a lot of those ways is they're not our true self. And we tend to oscillate over time. Like if, let's say you're a young boy and you grew up in recent times where people are a lot less tolerant of what young boys bring to the planet, which is we're rambunctious, man. When we're young, we're rambunctious. We want to climb on things. We want to, fake fight with our friends and our brothers and our sisters. And, we're very energized in general, young boys. And so there's not a lot of tolerance for that. So they try to squash that, right? And so if you get a message in your family as a young, rambunctious boy that that's not an okay way to be, you will find a way to curtail yourself to fit in, right? Remember, we're herding animals and we want to stay in the herd. We don't want to get kicked out. Psychologically, that's what's going on. So then might layer over top of your very masculine, true self a sort of feminine way of being, right? To get along and have people accept you. It's not going to feel good ultimately. Something you're just going to feel off. Boys that do that, young men that do that, tend to be very depressed, right? It just doesn't, something feels off. You forget that you did it. This is all mostly subconscious, right? And then you're going along. Now you become a teenager. Maybe people start picking on you for being not strong enough in some way, right? And so then what you might do is layer on top of that layer another layer of false self, of winning formula that you would consider more masculine, but it's in a masculine way of being you're inventing, right? Completely still disconnected from your own true masculine. And then that way of being can likely be damaging to you and to the world in some way, though you may not see it. And that can oscillate back and forth a number of times. So you have all these false selves sort of layered on top of yourself. You have to sift through all those. So I'm going to ask you guys, especially the men, look at your way of being in the world. I know you probably feel like this is how I am. This is my nature, right? I'm telling you, highly likely it is not. You're much more than your personality. Or another way to say that, your personality is much bigger than the one you let people see. And so you're much more capable. There's many more ways of being in the world that you could have available to you if you just open up to it. right? We tend to limit ourselves down to these tiny little pieces, and that becomes our personality. And like 95% of who and what we are, our strength, our abilities, is cut out, at least from our conscious mind. It's still here. We just don't have access to it. We won't allow it because we're more concerned with being accepted or kept in the herd. We don't want to be rejected or abandoned, right? Again, it's not a conscious thing. It's not like you're sitting around thinking about this. It's an automatic pilot. But I want you to look at yourself and ask about masculine and feminine, and ask yourself, do I feel more masculine or more feminine? And there's very few people, by the way, that are perfectly both. The very, very few people that have that going on. Most people are naturally polarized to one side or the other. And then again, like I say, they'll layer aspects of themselves on top of that that makes them seem to be the opposite, but that's not their ultimate truth. So ask yourself how you see yourself in the world. Are you more masculine, more feminine? Um, Again, feminine being receptive, right? Being the nurturing aspect of yourself, the soft, gentle, whatever you want to call that. The masculine being the productive, um, what is it called? Productive, purposeful force in you that can tend to be harder, not softer. Um, you're a little both, but you just ask yourself, which one do I feel like is most natural to me, or am I being most of the time? And when you find out which one you're being most of the time, ask yourself, okay, does this feel natural? Do I feel comfortable in this role or in this way of being? Right? Those are really good questions to ask yourself. Then ask yourself this question: am I clear about my purpose in the world? Do I even know what a purpose is? Am I clear about my purpose? Am I clear about my passion? Remembering from last week, our passion, right, is not necessarily the fun things we like to do. That's not what I'm talking about when I use that word. Your passion, your true passion with a capital P. That's always about giving in some way. Okay. So it's the thing you came to the planet to give. And when you give it, it feels really good. That's your passion. It'll bring a type of joy to you. It may not be pleasure, right? I'm not talking about pleasure or fun or that. Sometimes it'll be a both, right? But your passion is on a much higher level. And so ask yourself, what is it? What is my passion? What is my purpose? Um, do I feel more masculine, more feminine? And whichever one that is, does that feel natural to me? Do I feel comfortable in that? And I'm not going to tell you what to do with this stuff. I'm just asking you to ask the questions. We'll talk more in the future about ways to manage the answers that you come up with. And then the last one I want you to ask yourself is about um, your sense of connection or community in your life, especially the men. Women have this stuff going on too. The men, especially, or most young men right now, are very challenged with community. Most young men aren't surrounded by a group of guys that would show up for them in the middle of the night if they picked up the phone and called them, right? Most men are pretty disconnected from their community and from other friends, other people. Um, and so I want you to ask yourself this, not whether or not you're connected or disconnected, but ask yourself this question: do I, on a daily basis, make my contribution to the community? By making my contribution, I build community. I make connection with others. When was the last time I intentionally made connection with the people who cross my path, strangers, people throughout the day? I actually look somebody in the eye, make connection, make conversation with them. And by the way, this is interesting, right? The best conversationalists are what? They're the best question askers. If you want to have a lot of friends, get really good at asking genuinely interested questions. Be more concerned about being interested than being interesting. Because remember, most people want to be heard, but nobody's listening. So when you want to be heard, you try to be interesting, you try to be seen, right? Just let go of that. Ask yourself, when was the last time I genuinely connected with another person by actually receiving them, by actually being interested in them? Not interested in what I have to say are interested in getting them interested in me. That's what most people are doing most of the time. You know this, and you know it doesn't feel good, right? Because you're not being seen, right? So here's the thing. Remember, you have to give what you want to get. You have to flip out of the getting mode and go into the giving mode. So just ask, what have I not given to this situation, this person, this relationship? What is it that I want, and how can I be the giver of it? Is another way to ask it. How can I be the bringer of that? And so ask yourself those questions and then just let them do their work on you. You'll start to come up with ideas, a sense of a way of being that might be a little bit better or a little more energizing than the way you've been being. And then you can just experiment with that. I give you this experiment for the rest of this week, wherever you go, especially places where you don't know people, but there are people around. You try to connect with at least one person. You want to heal the planet? If we were all doing this, we transform the planet in no time. So at least one person, and the way you're going to connect with them, smile, say hi, ask them a question. Ask them a question about themselves and be genuinely interested in the answer, because people can feel that when you're listening, when you're genuinely interested. Okay, I'm going to let you go with that. So the three things: the feminine, purpose, and community or communion, connection. Those are the areas we get to work on as a whole in the world, as a society, and each of us as individuals. All right. Any more questions? Just drop them below. Nope. Yes, we've taught everyone to be masculine, Nate says. Yep. The loneliness coach. That's right. Um, and what the weird thing is that in the process of that, we've flipped, and men are being more feminine. And there's nothing wrong with being in touch with your feminine. I highly recommend it as a man, right? You want to be in touch with that, but you want to have a strong masculine and you want to feel good about it. You want to feel good about your masculine as a man. It's okay to be a man. It's okay to be masculine and everything that comes with that. In fact, when I do work with couples, what women are usually angry with their men about is not the fact that they're being too masculine. That's not it. It's not what they're angry with them about. They're angry with them because they're not showing up fully in their masculine force, and so they don't feel safe. Okay. Peace. Have a great rest of your week. I'll talk to you next Tuesday.